The lakes region of New Hampshire was illuminated by the gentle light of a late summer morning, the kind of light that causes the water of Squam Lake to shimmer like a sheet of silver that has been polished. Blake Shelton, who was wearing clothes that were worn out and a trucker hat that had faded, was standing on the shore and skipping stones with the concentration of a man who had grown up on rivers in Oklahoma. Gwen Stefani sat cross-legged on a nearby blanket while sketching the landscape in a leather-bound journal. She was wearing a cardigan that had a boho chick style and a hat with a wide brim. A joking tone could be heard in her voice as she yelled out to her boyfriend, "Babe, you are going to have to teach me how to do that." Across his shoulder, Blake flashed a grin. "You should not deviate from your doodling, city girl. I'll take care of the stone skipping myself." In the middle of the night, as they were drinking whiskey and wine at their Nashville house, the idea for this trip initially came to them. As Gwen yearned for a respite from the hectic schedule of touring and recording studios, she proposed a peaceful escape in a location that was real and raw. Blake, who is usually up for a change of pace, proposed that they go to New Hampshire after a friend gushed over the state's lakes and the allure of its small towns. As a result, they had left the limelight behind, boarded a flight to Manchester, and driven a pickup vehicle that they had hired into the heart of the lakes region. Their soundtrack consisted of a chaotic mix of Waylon Jennings and No Doubt. In Center Harbor, where they had made their home, they had rented a cabin with cedar shingles that was situated on the shore of Squam Lake, the same lake that was immortalized in the novel On Golden Pond. The cabin had a stone fireplace and a porch swing that seemed to groan beneath their weight as they sipped their coffee in the early morning hours. It was a rustic yet cozy cabin. The pine-scented air had already inspired Gwen to write a new song, and she had already filled half of her journal with notes for the tune due to the simplicity of the situation. Blake, on the other hand, was falling head over heels in love with the lake itself, describing it as damn near perfect for fishing. As Blake attempted to teach the finer aspects of a proper s'more to Gwen, who insisted on glamming up hers with artisanal chocolate, they had grilled steaks on the deck on their first night together. They laughed as Blake tried to describe the nuances of a proper s'more. Experimentation was the focus of the second day. They began their journey in Holderness, where they paddled across Squam Lake in a kayak, their paddles moving in a rhythmic pattern through the water. As Blake fell further and further behind, Gwen, who was surprisingly skilled, mocked him, causing his competitive spirit to flare. She yelled out, "You're getting schooled by a Cali girl, cowboy," as her laughter reverberated off the hillside that was covered in trees. After pulling their kayaks onto a sandy cove, they prepared for a picnic by bringing a bottle of rosé, some local cheeses, and crusty bread. Gwen had demanded that they bring the bottle. A loon screamed out in the distance as they were eating, and the eerie sound of its call caused Gwen to pause, her eyes widening in response. As she penned in her journal, she whispered, "We're going to incorporate that into the song." As Blake watched her, his heart was filled with joy as he reflected on the way in which she could make even the most peaceful times feel like a symphony. Later, they made their way into Meredith, a lakeside community that was bustling with activity during the final days of summer. The streets were lined with clapboard businesses selling a wide variety of goods, ranging from maple syrup to duck decoys that were hand-carved. Gwen, who was in her zone, dashed into a vintage clothing store and emerged with a vintage denim jacket, which she said was so punk rock. Blake was less enthusiastic about shopping, but he continued to be amused by her until he came upon a dive club that had a neon sign that flashed live music. Inside, a grizzled guitarist was performing a copy of Johnny Cash's Folsom Prison Blues, and Blake couldn't help but join in and do an impromptu rendition of the song. With her smile shining brighter than the stage lights, Gwen, who was sitting at the bar, filmed the entire event on her phone while the small crowd, which consisted primarily of locals drinking inexpensive beer, shouted excitedly. The following day, they ventured out into the great outdoors by climbing West Rattlesnake Mountain, which is a relatively short but rewarding trek located close to Squam Lake. The incline was something that Blake, who was wearing hiking boots that he had purchased on a whim, complained about, while Gwen, who was wearing yoga gear and a fanny pack, virtually bounced up the path. "This is like my happy place," she stated as she took a deep breath of the natural air in the forest. When they reached the peak, they were greeted with a breathtaking view of the lake, which included islands that were dispersed throughout the water like emeralds on blue velvet. Gwen was drawn in closer by Blake, who wrapped his arm around her waist. The statement that he made was, "You know, darling, this beats any red carpet." Her head was resting on his shoulder as she gave a slight nod. Simply put, they were enticed by the prospect of a vintage arcade and boardwalk atmosphere, so they made their way to Weirs Beach, which is located on Lake Winnipesaukee. That evening, the competitive side of Gwen's personality came out as she gathered tickets for the skee-ball match. Gwen, who was feeling homesick for her California roots, issued the challenge to Blake. Blake, unwilling to be outdone, won the claw machine, which resulted in her receiving a plush moose that she instantly called Merle after Haggard. As it trickled down their hands, they laughed like teenagers as they split a tall cone of soft-serve ice cream. As night set, they traveled along the lake on the picturesque railway, the whistle of the ancient train merging in with the murmur of crickets. While speaking softly, Gwen leaned very close to Blake. "Doesn't it feel like we're watching a movie right now?" He kissed her on the temple. "This is the best kind." The last adventure they had was a spur-of-the-moment diversion to Moultonborough, where they happened across the old hilltop mansion known as the Castle in the Clouds. Gwen was enthralled by the stone walls and expansive gardens of the house, and she sketched frantically as Blake listened to the tour guide's stories about the eccentric founder of the estate. Afterward, they walked along a local trail to reach a waterfall, where the mist cooled their faces as they stood at its base. Gwen, who was known to be a dreamer, closed her eyes and wished for something. When Blake was looking at her, he didn't have to wish for anything because he already had all he needed. On their final night, they constructed a campfire next to the cottage, and the flames crackled as the stars appeared in the sky above them. During the time that Gwen was harmonizing, Blake played a guitar that he had discovered in the cabin. He played a crude rendition of the song Austin as Gwen's voice blended in seamlessly with his. They discussed everything and nothing, including the newest music, old memories, and the children who were waiting to return home. Taking a deep breath and peering into the flames, Gwen remarked, "This place is like it hit reset on my soul." Blake poked at the embers and nodded. "I agree. It gives you the need to put it in a bottle and take it with you." When they woke up the following morning, they packed the truck and left a letter of gratitude for the owner of the cabin. Gwen browsed through her photographs as they drove south, the hills of the lake's region disappearing behind them. She came across pictures of Blake fishing, Gwen in the middle of a kayak, and the two of them laughing on the boardwalk. She stated in a stern tone, "We are going to return." Blake stretched for her hand and gave it a gentle squeeze. "It's a damned fact that we are, darling." And with the radio turned up to Sweet Escape, they made their way back home, carrying the enchantment of the lake's region with them in their hearts.